I never thought my life was interesting enough for anyone to investigate. I was the kind of guy who blended into the open office. Quiet, predictable, boring in the safest possible way. I showed up on time, met my deadlines, didn't start conflicts, didn't gossip. And maybe that's why the morning I realized someone had hired private investigators to dig into my life felt so unreal. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because a coworker simply wanted me gone. I'm telling this exactly how it happened, without embellishment. And if I sound tired, it's because I was. Not scared, not angry, just tired. The kind of exhaustion you feel when you realize someone's been smiling at you while secretly sharpening a knife behind your back. Her name was Megan. On the surface, she was perfect, confident, energetic, friendly. The kind of employee who racks up likes on corporate posts and always says the right things to management. Everyone in the office liked her for her charm, expressiveness, her style. I did too, at least until the day I watched her close the conference room door behind herself and tell our managers she had saved the project from failure, even though it was my project. I didn't say anything. I often didn't. And that month, she did it again and again, taking credit for my work, twisting facts, shifting responsibility onto me, even though she knew perfectly well that all the calculations, deadlines, and documents were done by me. Nothing dramatic, just small, steady jabs. Annoying, uncomfortable, but not yet something worth making a scene over. Honestly, I would have stayed that invisible office background if not for something strange. It was a Thursday. I was reviewing the budget report when I noticed a discrepancy. Not huge, but the kind that couldn't happen by accident. One line listed a payment to an external contractor who had no connection to our department. The name had come up before, but never in any of our projects. I messaged Megan, short and neutral. Hey, I noticed an extra line in the budget. Do you know what this is? She replied a minute later. Oh, that's nothing. Don't touch it. I'll deal with it later. I didn't think much of it. Budget oversight wasn't my only responsibility, but something about her tone felt off. Too quick, too casual. And more importantly, after that, the way she treated me shifted. Not openly, just subtly. Like someone had quietly adjusted the temperature in the room. She watched me more closely, smiled less. Sometimes went silent when I walked in. A couple of days later, I noticed a man in the office lobby. He was flipping through a magazine, but his gaze lingered on me just a little too long to feel random. At the time, I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe a contractor, maybe a visitor. Then the questions started. A coworker from another department suddenly asked if it was true that I had left my previous job on bad terms. I hadn't. I'd simply switched projects. Later, an old colleague messaged me, Hey, are you okay? Some kind of consultant came by asking about you. Weird guy. Said he was doing a check. No idea why you'd need one. He sent me the business card the guy left behind. A private investigation agency. Legitimate, not some back alley outfit. Office address, website, phone number. I sat staring at my monitor, trying to make sense of it. HR background check? No. I'd been with the company for 2 years. That process was long over. Maybe a mistake, possibly. But then how did that man know where I had lived 7 years ago? Information I'd never shared with him. I started noticing things I would have ignored before. Megan listened unusually closely whenever someone asked me something. She suddenly inserted herself into projects she had never shown interest in. She lingered near my desk longer than necessary, as if sizing me up. For days I told myself it was coincidence. No one would waste money and time digging into the life of someone like me. But the coincidences ended when the receptionist casually said, Hey, 2 guys came in looking for you. Said they were from HR, but when I asked them for names, they left. And they asked specifically about you. Something shifted inside me. Not fear, not panic, just a cold clarity. If someone is digging this hard into your past, it means the target has already been chosen, and that target is you. I sat down at my computer, opened a blank document, and wrote down every detail I could remember. Dates, questions, the people who had contacted me. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. This wasn't random. Someone was trying to assemble a version of my story. Something damaging, questionable, something that could be handed to management as a warning sign, but at that moment, I still didn't know who exactly had paid to turn my life upside down, or why. The first real crack in the story came from someone who had no reason to lie to me. My former coworker, Daniel. He messaged me out of nowhere late in the evening. "Man, that guy who asked about you. He wasn't from HR. I checked. He's a PI. Freelance, but tied to a bigger agency. Everything okay?" That was the moment irritation finally outweighed confusion. Not fear, irritation. Because I realized I wasn't dealing with an accident. Someone was deliberately assembling a version of me that didn't exist, and it kept getting louder. The next morning, one of our project managers approached me with that careful, slightly patronizing tone people use when they think they're helping. "Hey, just checking. Everything good? Megan mentioned you've been under pressure lately." Under pressure? That was interesting. I wasn't under pressure until Megan decided I was. Over the next few days, she turned the office into a quiet echo chamber. Little comments slipped into conversations, things like, "He's been overwhelmed lately. I think he's burning out. I'm just worried he's hiding how behind he is." The thing is, I wasn't behind. I had data, timelines, and task logs proving it. But in an office, perception always outruns facts. And Megan was building perception faster than I could blink. And then there were the strangers. A courier lingered in the lobby after dropping off a package, staring just a bit too intently at my badge. A barista across the street asked if my name was still the same as on my old ID from a job I'd had nearly a decade ago. Something I never told him. And every time, it felt less like coincidence and more like someone pulling threads around me, one by one. The turning point came when Daniel sent a second message. This time, he attached a photo, a business card, the same agency name I'd seen on the card from the consultant who had been questioning him, except below the phone number was the employee code, PI 3127, a registered private investigator under state law. He added, "He asked specifically about your performance issues. Said he's verifying patterns." Dude, you've never had performance issues. Performance issues. Interesting again. Someone was constructing a narrative. Precision targeted. That was when irritation sharpened into something colder. Clarity. I started reviewing my interactions with Megan over the past month, her sudden interest in overseeing my projects, her habit of correcting my explanations in meetings, her lingering looks at my desk, as if she was searching for something she could use, her subtle questions to interns about whether I seemed off lately. She wasn't reacting. She was preparing. Around that time, the receptionist pulled me aside. She looked uncomfortable, the way people look when they're not sure if they're helping or hurting you. Two men came again, not from HR. I checked the directory. They asked what time you usually go home, who you eat lunch with, whether you keep to yourself. I didn't say anything, just thought you should know. My irritation finally gave way to something heavier. Disbelief, not at the fact that someone was investigating me, but at how easily and quietly rumors could slip into the bloodstream of a workplace. And yet, no matter how uncomfortable it felt, the picture was becoming clearer. Someone was paying real money to distort my image, piece by piece, conversation by conversation. But that wasn't even the part that made my stomach drop. That happened when I finally checked the agency's public registry, a simple online database for licensed investigators. I searched PI 3127. The listing showed the investigator, the agency, and the client code. A client code that matched a payment trail I had seen once before. In one of the budget documents Megan had brushed off as a small mistake I'll fix later. I didn't want to believe it. It felt too calculated, too messy, too personal. But the numbers didn't lie, and neither did the pattern. She'd hired investigators to follow me, to interview people from my past, to build a case before I even knew I was on trial. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't try to rationalize anything. Instead, I opened a new document and began organizing every message, every odd interaction, every question someone had asked about me, every timestamp. And as I typed, something clicked into place inside me. A quiet shift, almost like a door slowly closing. I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't trying to excuse her behavior. That night, I stopped being the version of myself who assumed people acted in good faith. But I had no idea that this was just the beginning, and that the evidence she'd gathered to destroy me would soon start unraveling her own career thread by thread. The next morning, I made a decision. Not impulsive, not emotional, just necessary. I gathered the document I'd been compiling, attached screenshots, timestamps, the registry entry for PI 3127, everything that tied the investigators back to Megan's budget line. And instead of confronting her, which would have only fed her narrative, I sent it all to our internal compliance inbox. A quiet, formal message. No accusations, no drama, just facts. Within an hour, I received a reply. We've escalated your report. Please do not discuss this matter with colleagues pending review. When compliance moves fast, it means something is very wrong. But that was only the official side of things. The unofficial signs came even sooner. Our department head, a man who rarely looked anyone in the eye for more than 2 seconds, stopped by my desk. He asked one question softly. Did someone outside the company contact you recently? I answered truthfully, yes. His jaw tightened. He nodded once and walked away. No lecture, no warning, just the sort of silence that means something's breaking behind the walls. By noon, I noticed Megan watching me from across the open space. Not angrily, not suspiciously, curious, as if she was waiting for my reaction to something she thought she'd already set in motion. She had no idea her plan was leaking. Compliance reached out again that afternoon. This time they scheduled a meeting, not with me, but with our director, HR and IT security. I wasn't invited, which made sense. When the company investigates a potential breach involving outside parties, they don't start with the target. They start with the origin. And the origin, as far as the payment metadata suggested, was Megan. But things really escalated when IT security quietly froze. Accesses linked to 2 external vendor accounts, both of which appeared in the same budget sheets Megan had insisted were minor oversights. One belonged to a marketing subcontractor run by her cousin. The other was a routing shell that forwarded payments to the PI agency through a layered invoice. Chaos didn't erupt all at once. It seeped through the building like a slow leak. People whispered without realizing they were whispering. Managers walked faster. Doors that were usually open stayed shut. Every now and then, someone's eyes flicked toward Megan's desk, then quickly away. By late afternoon, a compliance officer contacted me for a brief, factual call. They didn't ask for feelings, motives, or theories, only what I had observed, what I had documented, and how I knew the investigators had questioned my former colleagues. Their tone told me everything. They were no longer checking if something happened. They were establishing a timeline. 2 days later, something shifted. I received a message from a number I didn't recognize, a senior investigator from our corporate security team. He wrote, "Your report aligns with evidence we've collected independently. Do not engage with the employee in question. We will handle the next steps." Independently, meaning they had found things I hadn't. Around this time, I ran into one of the junior analysts from finance, a quiet guy who normally avoided eye contact. He hesitated before speaking. "I probably shouldn't say anything," he murmured, "but they're reviewing every vendor Megan submitted in the last quarter. All of them. Something's off." something was more than off. Compliance had uncovered a pattern. Megan had been inflating project costs for months, funneling work through connected contractors, and claiming credit for deliverables she barely touched. And when she realized a discrepancy in the budget might expose her, she tried to build a shield. A story that I was unstable, unreliable, maybe even involved in something improper. If I became the office problem, no one would look too closely at her spreadsheets. But her plan had a fatal flaw. Private investigators don't just answer to their clients. They keep records, invoices, emails, call logs, surveillance attempts. And when compliance requested those records, the agency cooperated fully. Why wouldn't they? They had no loyalty to her, only to legality. One of the compliance officers told me later, off the record, that the moment they saw Megan's name on the payment authorization linked to the investigator contract, the room went silent. Not the shocked kind of silence. The kind that means someone's career just hit a wall. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. A security manager, a man who barely knew I existed, pulled me aside in the hallway. His voice was low, steady, almost reassuring. If you're clean, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. But someone else might need a lawyer. That was the first real exhale I'd taken in weeks, not because I wanted revenge, not because I felt vindicated, but because the weight on my shoulders finally shifted onto the person who had built it. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. And the investigation, the one Megan paid for, was about to unravel everything she had built on other people's work. By the end of that week, compliance sent a final request. Please be available on Monday for a formal meeting regarding the investigation outcome. I didn't know it yet, but the next time I walked into that room, nothing in our department would ever look the same again. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on Monday, the kind of time companies choose when they want everyone involved to feel the weight of formality. I arrived a few minutes early, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to walk into the room after anyone else. I wanted a clear view of what this moment actually was. HR was there, compliance was there, our department head, 2 people from corporate security, and Megan. She didn't look scared. She looked irritated, as if this entire thing was a minor inconvenience she could charm her way out of. She greeted the room with a confident smile, smoothed her blouse, and sat down like someone expecting a promotion review. Security began. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't lean forward. They didn't accuse. They presented. First, payment records. The invoices routed through a marketing subcontractor. The subcontractor legally connected to Megan's cousin. The subcontractor who had billed hours on projects it never touched. Then, the PI contract, signed through a secondary vendor Megan had access to, paid using company funds hidden behind mislabeled project expenses. Timeline aligned exactly with the period she began circulating doubts about my behavior. Then came the communication logs, emails from her personal account to the PI agency, requests for interviews with my former coworkers, instructions to verify any instability or past workplace issues. Her voice finally cracked when they showed the last item, the PI's full report, which, thanks to compliance's subpoena-like internal authority, the agency had turned over without hesitation. The report was clean, painfully clean, and every page of it undermined the story she'd been building. Megan tried to recover. It was a misunderstanding, she insisted. I wasn't accusing him of anything. I just had concerns. Leadership expects vigilance, and I was doing what I believed was necessary to protect the team. HR didn't interrupt. Security didn't interrupt. They simply moved to the next slide. This one showed altered budget lines, then altered timestamps in our project management system, then comparison screenshots proving she'd edited several documents after the deadlines and after I submitted my work to make her contribution look larger and mine smaller. I watched her composure thin like ice under a slow spring melt. "I can explain that," she whispered. But explanations weren't the problem anymore. The pattern was a compliance officer leaned forward for the first time. Your actions created reputational and legal risk for the company. You submitted fraudulent invoices. You misrepresented internal data. You authorized a third-party investigation into a coworker without company approval, and you attempted to influence his reputation through misleading statements. Her breath caught. Misleading? I never lied. You didn't need to, the officer replied calmly. You created a narrative, and then paid someone to find evidence for it. Then they turned to me. Not dramatically, just a shift of attention, a confirmation. For the record, HR read aloud, the investigation found no evidence of misconduct, instability, or performance issues on your part. Your work quality for the past evaluation cycles is documented as exemplary. Any concerns raised about you were deemed unsubstantiated. It was strange. I expected to feel triumphant, relieved, vindicated, but all I felt was quiet, a long overdue quiet. HR informed Megan that her employment was terminated effective immediately pending review by the company's legal team. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. No tears, no anger, just a hollow, stunned disbelief. As she gathered her things, she finally looked at me, not with hatred, not with guilt, with something closer to confusion, like she couldn't understand how someone so boring had ended up being the one person she couldn't control. And then she was gone. No scenes, no shouting, just the soft click of the door closing behind her. When the meeting ended, compliance thanked me for documenting everything so clearly. Security thanked me for conduct during a sensitive situation. HR offered a formal apology on behalf of the company. I nodded, said thank you, walked out. The office felt different after that. Not because people suddenly treated me like a hero. They didn't. They treated me like someone they'd underestimated. A man who stayed calm, observed, prepared, and didn't break even when someone else tried to script his downfall. A few weeks later, I resigned on my own terms. Not dramatically, not in anger. I just realized I didn't want to spend my life in a place where someone like Megan could rise as far as she had. Not because she was competent, but because she was confident and loud. I accepted an offer from another company, smaller, quieter, healthier, where people cared more about doing their jobs than performing them. On my last day, I passed the conference room where everything had unfolded. The lights were off. The chairs were empty. And I understood something important. Closure doesn't always come from punishment. Sometimes it comes from walking away, knowing you didn't lose yourself while someone else tried to erase you. Megan never contacted me again. I heard rumors later, legal trouble, financial audits, a messy exit from the industry altogether. But none of it mattered anymore. Her downfall wasn't my victory. My victory was stepping out of a story she tried to write for me, and knowing finally that the truth held, even when someone paid to bury it.